Welcome to the Next Gen Environmental Firm, the show where we talk with leaders building the future of sustainability, waste innovation, and environmental impact, and how they are optimizing their operations to achieve it. Today, we are joined by Orion Black-Brown, president of Green Mountain Technologies, a company designing composting systems for universities, farms, municipalities, and large-scale operations across North America. Orion, welcome. I'm glad you are here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, Yolanda.
Orion, so you recently stepped into the president role of the company. Your father founded back in 1992, which makes GMT older than many startups combined. What has that transition been like for you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, it was a slow and gradual transition. Fortunately, I had really good mentorship and pretty good handholding as I moved into this role, and I'm still pretty supported in it, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, I originally started the company just as an engineer, and then I got involved in our consulting practice, helping people think about, I want to go from the point where I want to create a composting facility to actually building and implementing the technology, getting the permits, all those things. So that's really where I started. And after doing that for a while, slowly I got more and more into the kind of like leadership roles at the company. And eventually I'm here as running the company at this point. And yeah, it's been a great transition, and I'm really grateful to have such a wonderful company in the family. And, there's challenges and perks that come with a family business. As you might imagine, working with your family has its like ups and downs, but for the most part, it's been pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. So you mentioned you wear a lot of hats, so business development, marketing, and even consulting. What does a typical week look like for you?
It does depend because I wear so many different hats. But a typical week is usually a good amount of working with prospective clients that are coming in the door. So I do sales work at present for our large facilities. We have another salesperson at the company that manages the smaller facilities. So probably about 25-30% of my time is spent doing that. And then another third of it's just in management. And then the last third is some combination of writing blog posts, talking on podcasts and different events, trade shows, hiring. There's so many different odds and ends that come up when you run a small business. So every week looks a little bit different. So that last 1/3 kind of varies. Like right now we're in the process of hiring 2 new employees. So a lot of time is getting spent in that, talking to folks, trying to find the right candidates, so on and so forth.
Right. So what topic do you like to talking the most in the podcast and seminars?
Oh, for me, the thing I like to instill the most in other people is just an understanding of why composting is important and the power of it as a tool. Because I think it's something that is really accessible and easy to do, and almost anyone can do it at home. And it has pretty powerful impacts for the environment, for the planet, and people just don't know. They're just not aware of that. I think there's just not that much information and education about composting. So that's kind of generally what I like to spread. I also am pretty nerdy once you get into like actual composting technology. So I love to talk about like the really nerdy kind of design engineering stuff.
Right. So let me try now about little the technologies. And from what I understand, so Green Mountain Technologies is basically the composting wizard behind the big stuff. Not the cute little backyard bins. The giant industrial. We have mountains of food waste and manure kind of composting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So far, so good?
So far, so good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in simple terms, you help big organizations turn huge piles of organic waste into high quality compost using the right technology for your job. My question is, so for listeners who are new to GMT, how would you describe what you do in the simplest way?
Well, honestly, you did a pretty good job of describing it fairly simply. I don't know if I can one-up you. We help people create high quality compost. Yeah, I mean, the typical kind of flow with a client is someone will reach out to us. They'll be like, hey, I have 10,000 tons of waste that I'm getting over a course of a year. It's chicken manure or whatever, and I want to compost it. And then I will talk to them, figure out where they're located, what feedstock being the waste that they're bringing in. And based on that sort of information, I'll start looking at technologies that make sense for them. So if they're at a location that's like a farm out in the middle of nowhere, it's a very different process than if they're right in the heart of the city. So based on kind of their location, what kind of permit requirements are built around that, and then the odor potential and potential adverse effects of runoff and so on and so forth from the composting operation, I'll then say, I think your best bet is going in this direction from a compost technology standpoint. And then we'll work with them and, go through all the sort of exercises you need to understand whether or not this is a space that you want to actually invest money into. And if there's a business model that's going to work for you. And once people get to that point, then they can hire us and we really get into the nitty-gritty and design it and permit it and provide the technology. That's kind of mostly where I play, is just at the very beginning, the concept design, trying to find the right thing for our clients and their situation, and helping them make a decision about, is this going to work for us? Is this actually sustainable for not only the planet, but also economically and for our community? And then once those kind of 3 pillars of sustainability are checked, then helping them move forward.
When you start talking to the new prospect or new client, what stops them or actually they pursue with the composting? What is these challenges that they have to overcome first before they say, yes, we want your technology?
I mean, a big piece is there's a few different pieces, but I would say one of the biggest ones is actually securing the organic waste stream. So depending on where you're situated, that might be easy. Maybe you're a farmer and you have 1 million chickens, and then you just have the manure from those chickens and you can compost it. But oftentimes it's more complicated because you're someone who's trying to start a business and you need to find all these different forms of organic matter to bring in and then actually compost. So that's the first piece. And usually this piece is very, very important because that's where most of your money comes from, is you actually get paid to take that organic waste, because the alternative is it goes to a landfill or gets trucked some large distance to someplace, and that all costs money. So that's the first big piece that people need to figure out. The second one is land. They need to make sure they have land selected that's zoned correctly, because these operations are oftentimes they fall under solid waste, like a landfill or a transfer station. So there's a lot of different regulations and land use requirements that are built around them. And then also we're dealing with potentially stinky waste streams. So you don't want to, you can compost actually right in the heart of the city and treat all the odors, but it's a lot more expensive. So finding land, ideally, it's a little bit more remote, makes the whole project go much more smoothly. So those are kind of the big pieces at the beginning, is getting the right feedstocks and getting the right land. And then once you have those 2 things worked out, the rest follows.
Okay. Can you talk me through a little bit about your technologies that you have? And please give example, I know you work with many industries, and which industry is more acceptable of the composting than others, and where you would like to see more composting happening?
Yeah. So I'll start with the first piece, which is technologies. Composting is, I guess I'll step back just a little bit and say composting is defined as the aerobic, meaning within the presence of oxygen, degradation of organic material. There's another way that you can deal with this waste, which is anaerobically, and that's a whole different industry, anaerobic digestion. And obviously, in that case, there's no oxygen. But I'm just going to talk about the composting side right now. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure we have the right amount of oxygen, moisture, and mix for this pile to break down. It's kind of like a recipe, so you got to get all those pieces right. So big picture, there's kind of 2 categories of composting technology. One is without aeration or passively aerated. And then the other one is with forced aeration. And that's where you're actually taking blowers and you're pushing air into the piles to make sure there's the oxygen levels that you need. And once you start to do forced aeration, you have more control of the process. You have less odor because all the odors come from when the piles go anaerobic. So once they go anaerobic, that's when you start to get the smells and so on and so forth. So if you can actually blow the air in, you can ensure that the oxygen levels are high and you get rid of most of your odor emissions. And then the most classic way of composting without aeration is what we call windrow composting. And that's where you build these sort of long triangles of compost. And you use these wild looking machines that have a big drum and they straddle it and they spin and mix the pile up. They're very like intimidating. They look like they're out of Batman or something. And then the aerated side, you can do the same thing, but with forced aeration, or there's all sorts of different technologies. The most common in the States is what we call aerated static pile, where you're not turning it and you just put it kind of on this aeration system and let it blow. So that's sort of the technology piece. There's all these different sort of iterations and ways to configure this stuff. But that's kind of the big picture. And what was the second piece of that question?
Is these machines, so for example, you have a client, are these machines that deliver to the client's location and then it's composting and the compost goes somewhere? Or it's machines that actually you take the dirt or whatever, and then take to the machine? How does it work?
The way it works is we will establish some sort of location, some sort of facility. Oftentimes these are located on farms or near landfills. It depends on the waste stream. So if you're doing like agricultural waste or manure, it's usually on a farm. If you're doing waste that, we all have like the little buckets up our street, the organic waste that goes in that goes to a composting facility. And that's more within the waste management sector. So oftentimes those are located next to landfills, at transfer stations, places like that are a part of the existing waste management infrastructure. And the way it looks is the waste comes to this composting facility. Oftentimes it's like big pieces of wood and stuff like that. So it gets ground up and then it goes into the composting process where it will sit for 2 to 12 months, depending on the technology you're using. And then it comes out and you put it through a screener, which like basically just separates it into different sizes. And the smaller size, we call it the fines from the screen. That's what then gets sold as finished compost. So when you buy compost, you're buying the fines after that whole process. And that material can get bagged and sold at, like a Home Depot or a Walmart. It can also be sold wholesale. The vast majority of compost is sold wholesale to farmers, municipalities, things like that. Or you can even like pelletize it in terms of like fertilizer and different kind of specialized applications as well.
Okay, that's interesting. So composting is becoming a bigger part of sustainability conversations as well. And especially with food waste bans, landfill restrictions, and climate goals. What major shifts are you seeing in the composting industry right now?
Yeah, it's been huge. At least in North America, we've seen a massive transition in the last 5 to 10 years, I would say. And a lot of that was fueled by some very big organic bans on landfills that were passed. And these laws or these ideas have kind of been passed historically, but they've never actually had legislation with enough teeth to create implementation. But for the first time, really starting with California, they passed this landmark bill called SB 1383. And that was the first time that a state had really pushed organic bans on landfills that had enough punitive measure for people that did not adopt to actually make it move forward. And they were also investing in infrastructure and all these other pieces that you need. Because it's easy to say, hey, we want to get the organics out of the landfill. But then what are you going to do? How are you going to make that happen? How are you going to fund it and incentivize people to actually build the infrastructure and get the separation at the source to actually make that goal a reality? So Yeah, there's been a tremendous shift. There's a lot of momentum in the organics composting space, and a lot of it has been top down. But I will also say there's been this resurgence, or it's not really a resurgence, just a surge in what we call community composting. And
Right.
these are small kind of community organizations, individuals that are popping up in areas that don't have food waste composting typically. So cities like Atlanta and throughout the East Coast, all over, it's happening everywhere, where the city hasn't actually taken the step to say you can put your food waste in this bin and we'll pick it up and take it to a composting facility. These private companies come in and they start offering services where you can pay $20 a month or whatever, and they'll pick it up and compost it for you. And that's been tremendous because it's proven to the cities that people care about this. People are willing to go through with it. And it also has laid a pathway for creating these projects and building infrastructure. And oftentimes these are like the first people to actually build food waste composting facilities in the state. So they're oftentimes like writing the actual regulations for composting if they do it and literally building the pathway forward. So yeah, it's a really exciting time. We are generally, I would say, in North America, especially America. Canada's a little bit ahead of us. But we're probably like 15, 20 years behind Europe. So we've
Okay.
been pretty slow to adopt waste management compared to other Western countries and some Asian countries. Japan and Korea actually have some of the best composting and recycling infrastructure in the world.
Okay. Which state do you see growing the most? I believe the California first, and then what will be other states that is growing and really taking care of composting?
Yeah, it's actually been kind of surprising. I mean, California has been the mainstay, but we've been seeing projects popping up all over the place. In a lot of states, you wouldn't expect it, like big projects in Georgia, big projects in Idaho, all these states that you don't really think of as taking progressive action towards these environmental things. Composting is still coming in. And I think that's because one, oftentimes those states are closer to agriculture, which is the market for the finished compost. And two, we've seen a lot of volatility in fertilizer prices. And that's actually really about to, I think, get much worse with what's going on in Iran right now and the shortage of fertilizer supply. But it also happened with the war in Ukraine, where fertilizer prices spiked and a bunch of farmers can no longer afford fertilizer. So they're like, hey, we should start composting. We know that this has similar effects and can make our fertilizer go farther. But generally speaking, I would say California, Washington State, New York, and New Jersey and Massachusetts are kind of the biggest states for composting. And that's because they have top-down legislation that's saying we need to get this organic material out of the landfill. So there's a lot of momentum in those states.
Okay, well, that's good opportunities for your company too, right? To grow in USA. That's fantastic. Now, you work with universities, farms, and large scale operations. Which sectors are growing the fastest and why?
I would say there's a lot of interest in on-farm composting right now. It's not really a space that we have historically worked in as much. We've mostly been focused on food waste composting as a company, but we've been transitioning and focusing more on the on-farm composting as well because we see the need um, and we see the growth in that space. There's also a lot of, so going back to what I was talking about earlier, composting is the aerobic degradation, and then there's also this anaerobic degradation process. That whole industry that is focused on anaerobically breaking material down is called anaerobic digestion. And basically what they're doing is when this material breaks down without oxygen, it releases methane, and you can capture that methane and you can turn it into natural gas that can be burned.
Okay.
And those projects are really, really expensive, but there's been a lot of money that's been funneled into those projects. And even after that process happens, you still have an output from it, and we call that output digestate. So there's been a lot of growth in that space, and we've been working in that space a lot to help these companies then take that digestate and turn it into compost. Because the digestate by itself is not very valuable, as it's still really broken down and it's very unstable. So we can then take that, compost it, dry it out and make it a higher value fertilizer, which is pretty cool because you can then take your waste, turn it into gas, and then turn it into compost. Like this
Compost,
extra
yeah,
step.
it's like
Yeah.
all natural, the wheel, circle, which can be used, and that's fantastic. Actually, this
Yeah.
is first time I'm hearing that, but that's exactly that people need to hear. Easy, simple, but at the same time, it's powerful too. What's working particularly well for GMT right now, whether in product adoption or technology adoption, consulting, or new projects?
Yeah, we've just been really focusing. I mean, we're a smaller company, but there's like 15 to 20 employees. We're not a huge company. And we've really just been focused on putting more of our energy into the core products that really work and people buy a lot of. It's easy as a small business to get stretched thin and want to do a lot of different things. And we do want to do that because we personally believe that there's not like one technology that's right for composting. Um, so we want to offer all those services, but finding ways to offer all those services and with each service make them still world class and like make us the best option for that service. That takes energy and smart allocation of resources because most of our competitors are just focused on one thing, but we're doing multiple, and we want to make sure that we can really do all those things really well. So that's what I've been mostly focused on since joining, is like really honing in on the kind of key product lines and making those things work incredibly well so that they stand on their own legs. And then in the spaces where we're not investing as much energy, just finding partners that are the leaders in those spaces. And we partnered with an Austrian company that's really leading the charge for composting in Europe. And we're using them to fill in the gaps in places that we don't really want to invest our energy into building new. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. So
Right,
we can just
right. So, but you're expanding to Europe as well. That's been, with the partners.
Yeah, we've been working in Europe. We do some work internationally, but our main focus has been on North America. I'm trying to get us more into South and Central America as well, but it's a slow development because, in a lot of places, they don't even have great waste management for the trash at this point, and organics is kind of like a next step in a lot of cases. So it's a bit of a slower fight there, but we're seeing some good traction in parts of Central and South America as well.
Okay. So soon you'll have all international presence too. Like amazing. Now, what's been challenging as you scale? You mentioned being a small team, about 10, 15 people, which means you're involved in everything. So what are the challenges?
The main challenge I'm working on right now is just getting myself out of everything. And I've got some awesome people in my team, and I've been able to get out of big parts of the company, but still trying to like move myself out of more and more roles as I transition into this role as president. So I have more time to just think big picture. Another challenge that we face is the level of uncertainty in the global markets right now. And, we are manufacturing technology and we're proud to make everything here in America. But even with that, tariffs, changes in shipping, just the speed at which things are adjusting has a pretty intense impact on our business and the cost of materials and things like that. So just keeping up with that has been pretty difficult as a small business that doesn't have like a team of lawyers and
Every business suffering because of the tariffs and all this landscape that is going on. Yes. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, it's been wild. So that's been a challenge. For the most part, our business is running pretty smoothly, and I think we'll always be able to run it with under 20 people, and which is awesome. It's like we can be a really efficient business even as we scale more and more. So yeah, just making sure we're really getting the right people, getting the right systems in place to make the company scalable. Those have all been focuses. Yeah.
Great. Yes, definitely. Because there's lots of opportunities for your company for sure, internationally as well. But USA, still need to explore USA more.
Yeah.
So you've been in consulting side as well, right? So business. So how does the technical background help you when you talk to customers about equipment and system designs?
Yeah, so I'm just going through this whole process right now because I'm trying to hire someone to do the sales for me. And I what I'm finding is it's really important. The technical knowledge is really important because we're, at least in my case, I'm helping people think about very large investments, millions of dollars, and they really need to trust in us and trust in our knowledge. Um, Before they're willing to, go on this adventure with us. So that technical background is really important for helping people understand that we actually do know what we're talking about. We've done this before. We've helped people compost successfully, and we know what we're doing. And we're not going to we're not selling snake oil. We're not just here with this new idea and we're trying to get people to put a bunch of money into it. No, this is something we've actually done. We've proven, we know it works, and we're going to stand by it in the long run. So that technical background is really key there because these projects tie in all these different aspects. They tie in civil, they tie in mechanical, they tie in electrical, and you need to be able to understand how all those pieces are integrated to actually really walk people through and support people through the whole process. Even if you're just on the sales side, developing a good cost model requires you to understand what does concrete cost? What's the grade of this facility? Things like this, and how that's going to impact the cost of the overall project.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But your company has been since 1992, so you have really proven record of your work and scalability. So I think customers appreciate that knowledge for sure. So let's go now a bit in the future. So where do you want GMT to be in the next 6 to 12 months, and what does the growth look like for you?
Yeah, I personally am not someone who's really in it to IPO my business or something like that. That's not the goal for me, and I don't think it would be possible. Um, but yeah, what I really want and the way I measure our success is based on how much infrastructure we can build for people, and that all comes down to making it more accessible. My focus and vision is providing technology that allows for more infrastructure to be built. And the way that you do that is you bring costs down, the cost of construction, but most importantly, the cost of operations. Because when you look at these facilities, the largest piece of the pie, 75% of the cost, is operations cost. It's not the infrastructure itself. So, how can we build and design facilities that actually bring down that operational cost in the long run, while simultaneously helping to lower the barriers to entry? So that's kind of the big picture focus. How we're tackling that in the short term is we're making some adjustments to some of our product offerings, and we're really standardizing some of our offerings, especially in the smaller scale, because as I was talking about earlier, there's all these community composters that are popping up all over the place. And I can tell you, because I've seen the books for some of these operations, these people are not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they really believe in composting. So we're trying to find some ways to provide technology that's much more accessible for these kind of small folks while meeting some of the needs that they have. One of the needs being oftentimes they're composting within more densely populated areas, so they need more odor control. But at the same time, they don't really have money. So how do we bring those two things together to help support that whole industry? So yeah, that's one of my big focuses for the next 6 to 12 months. Also, personally, trying to get out of doing as many things. So on a personal note, hiring some help. And if you're interested in working at Green Mountain Technologies, check out our LinkedIn. We got 2 job postings. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So may I ask you how long you've been as a president?
8 months.
Okay, so a brand new cook president.
I'm a brand new president. Yeah, I'm just a little baby.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So you have a really big mission, and you looking it right, and you know what you want to achieve, and I'm sure your family and team is really looking up to you to deliver it too.
Oh yeah, pressure's on.
So, so now you just if you could solve one major challenge today within your organization, within the customers, within anything, just think broadly, where it will be operational, regulatory, market based. What would it be?
Oh gosh, I have three that are coming to mind. I have so many wishes for the industry. Let me tone it down.
Well, you can maybe one internally, maybe within the company, and then one externally.
I mean, most of my wishes are for the industry as a whole. And I would say one piece that people might not be as aware of if they are coming from the outside is that the way the United States works is we're like 50 different kind of countries within one country. And every single one of those countries has totally different regulations when it comes to composting. And it makes it really hard to implement and build these systems because the regulatory landscape is so varied all over the place. So one wish would be if we could really get some clear national regulations for these composting facilities, and also clear regulations on what constitutes finished compost. Because right now,
and this is sort of within the USA, or you mean more of other countries? Within the USA. Okay.
This is within the USA. Yeah. So, I mean, other countries, whole other thing. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. Oops, sorry, you're muted, Yolanta.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Oh, good. No, no, continue. Sorry.
Cool. Yeah. So just within the USA, I mean, there's so much variation in the way that these systems are regulated, and even what it means to have finished compost, like how finished compost is defined, is different in different places. So if we could have really clear guidelines on what constitutes finished compost and what boxes you need to check if you want to build a composting facility, that would help the industry so much, in my opinion.
Okay. No, that's brilliant. Yeah, definitely. Is it just from my understanding? So when you say regulatory approval, is that under EPAs or under something else? I mean, it's like within the states, what kind of agencies dealing with the composting regulations?
It's totally dependent on the state. But typically you're under the local Department of Environmental Quality. So every state has its own Department of Environmental Quality. And then you also have your county, and the county has its own regulations. And then sometimes you have like the wildlife board. And then you also have the Department of Health that's involved, because the Department of Health regulates anything that's sold to consumers, and compost is sold to consumers. Then sometimes you have the air districts that get involved, and you can just see how, it gets so complicated. There's so many different parties that can get pulled into this stuff. And it creates a lot of challenges to entry. Like, for instance, in California, which is probably one of the worst offenders when it comes to complexity for building a compost facility, this can take over 10 years. We have a client that's been trying to permit a compost facility for over 10 years, and they've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into getting the permit, which makes it really hard. And they might not even get the permit. So that makes it really, really hard to have people want to build a composting facility if you have to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of years into the process, but you might not even get it. That's an extreme example. Usually it's not that long. Usually it's more like a year or two at worst, but you can see why that would be a big hindrance for the industry.
Yeah, that's for sure. Even 1-2 years is a long time, because you want the compost now. You want the compost now, not after 2 years. Okay. Now understandable. So, do you see technologies like automation, data monitoring system plays a big role in the composting in the future?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think there's a huge role for automation in the composting space. And it's something we're definitely looking at, is how can we use more technology? How can we have more sensors, but appropriately? Because I think it's also really easy to over-engineer these things and add a bunch of bells and whistles that actually just make the whole process more complicated, because you have all this technology you need to take care of. And composting environments are really harsh, so a lot of stuff breaks in them. But I think a big space where we're going to see improvement is Unfortunately, in automations, I think a lot of the people that were involved in these composting processes are probably going to start getting removed and automated. There's a lot of, at these facilities, there's a lot of people driving around like big tractors and heavy loaders and using grinders and all this industrial equipment. And I think we're going to see a lot more automation in that space in the coming years. And then also, one thing that will be great, and I think everyone will be happy to see automated, is in the contamination removal, because these composting facilities, just like all things in this world, wind up with a bunch of plastic that then turns into microplastics. So I think we're going to see better and better technology for removing the plastic contaminants before they enter the composting stream, and also after the composting process when we're screening the material.
Okay. Yeah. So that way. Anything else you see, or so that's part. Anything else you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously all the ways that AI is influencing businesses on the business side. But yeah, composting generally, it's not like something where there's a lot of like big data, like a lot of the other spaces. The AI is hitting really hard right now. It's much more of like a kind of logistics problem where you have like heavy equipment moving things around and pieces like that. I think we will see like a little bit of there's reporting and compliance work that you need to do on the composting side, just saying that, your compost is at a certain temperature, so the pathogens are destroyed. And I think that side will probably see more advanced control systems, and that's something we're working on right now in that space. But I don't think we're going to see huge shifts like we might see in some of the other spaces.
Okay, and I have a just last question to wrap up. So composting is becoming more connected to climate goals, methane reduction, and circular economy strategies. How do you see GMT fitting into that bigger picture?
The piece that we always want to be is the infrastructure, the composting infrastructure piece. And if you don't have the infrastructure, the circularity doesn't work. And I think this is something that oftentimes gets overlooked when governments and things are like, we want to have no organics in our landfill. Like, that's great. But you're landfilling, 2 million tons a year of organics. That's a ton of infrastructure that you need to build. And that infrastructure takes time to build. It takes money to build. So I think that's the piece that we're always going to be playing in, is how can we help make that infrastructure piece as easy, seamless, and ultimately de-risking that piece as much as possible. Because oftentimes, I think this is where a lot of the capital goes into, is the infrastructure. And we need to help people make that investment less risky so that it's easier and more accessible. So I think that's always where we're going to fit in. We obviously we see the value in advocacy, legislation, education, all these other pieces, and we're going to do our part in those as much as we can and spread the compost gospel wherever we can. But our focus and where we really have specialty and can offer something is in that infrastructure side. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Orion, this has been fantastic, and thank you for sharing such a clear and accessible insights about composting and waste infrastructure and future of sustainability system. Thank you for joining us on the Next Gen Environmental Firm. A huge thank you to Orion Black-Brown for sharing his perspective on composting, sustainability, and the future of waste innovation. If you enjoyed this episode, follow the show for more conversations with leaders shaping the environmental sector. Until the next time, keep building the future. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.